Do you believe there are creatures that can offer us everything we desire, but for a price we only discover when it's already too late? This is the true story of Omar al-Rashid, a 28-year-old young man who lived in Casablanca, Morocco. An ordinary man who thought he knew the boundaries between the visible and invisible worlds, until an irrefusable proposal changed his life forever. What happened to Omar in the Atlas Mountains will shake your certainties about faith, temptation, and the power of the supernatural world. Listen until the end, because this story is not just an account. It's a warning that could save your souls. Dramatic pause. But before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're listening to this story from. I want to know which countries this message is reaching. Also check if you're already subscribed to the channel, because today you'll hear something that will change your perspective on the invisible world forever. Have you ever felt an invisible presence watching you? Have you ever had the sensation that something was calling you toward a dangerous path? Keep that question in mind while listening to Omar's story, because by the end you might recognize similar signs in your own lives. Omar al-Rashid was no different from thousands of young Muslims of his generation. A civil engineering graduate from Hassan II University, he worked at a small construction company in Casablanca's industrial district, earning just enough to pay rent for his modest two-bedroom apartment in the Ma'arif neighborhood. But Omar carried an invisible burden that grew heavier each day. His mother, Aisha, had been sick for 2 years. What began as simple diabetes symptoms had transformed into something much more serious: kidney problems, uncontrolled hypertension, and an endless sequence of complications requiring expensive imported medications from Europe. Every morning, Omar woke up at 5:30 a.m. to prepare his mother's special breakfast, sugar-free, low sodium, measuring each gram as if it were gold. She had lost 15 kilograms in recent months, and her hands, which once sewed with such skill, now trembled when she tried to hold a cup of tea. "Ya Allah," Omar whispered every night, kneeling on his small prayer rug in the corner of his room. "Why, when I need your help the most, do all paths seem closed? Why is the woman who taught me your name suffering like this?" The apartment was always silent during these hours. Only the sound of his mother's labored breathing in the next room and the distant murmur of Casablanca traffic through poorly sealed windows. Omar spent hours staring at the ceiling, calculating and recalculating expenses. His salary barely covered rent, basic food, and a fraction of the medications. He had sold everything of value: his father's watch, his mother's gold earrings, even his university textbooks. His faith was more than shaken. It was shattered. Prayers seemed to echo in emptiness, as if Allah had simply turned his back on him. Work was mechanical, repetitive, poorly paid. His colleagues talked about vacations, new cars, weddings, while Omar calculated whether he could buy the cheapest antibiotics without compromising the week's food. University friends had gradually distanced themselves. Initially, they offered help, words of comfort, prayers. But 2 years of constant problems exhaust even the most generous souls. Phone calls became less frequent, invitations ceased, and Omar found himself alone with his burden, questioning not only divine justice, but the very existence of a God who allowed such suffering. "Maybe I did something terrible in past lives," Omar thought, though he knew Islam doesn't believe in reincarnation. "Maybe Allah is punishing me for some sin I don't even remember committing." It was in this state of absolute despair, when his faith hung by a thread as thin as a spider's web, that an opportunity came to him that would change everything. An opportunity that would test not only his material need, but the very essence of his soul. It was a particularly rainy Tuesday in December when Khalil, an old university colleague, appeared at the small office of the construction company where Omar worked. The building was old, with wall infiltrations and an elevator that worked only 3 days a week. Omar was hunched over architectural plans when he heard a familiar voice. "Omar al-Rashid, my old friend!" Omar looked up and barely recognized the man before him. Khalil was completely transformed. where there had once been a thin student who wore the same worn jeans for weeks at a time, now stood an impeccably dressed man. Perfect Italian cut suit, golden Rolex gleaming on his wrist, genuine leather shoes that probably cost more than Omar earned in 3 months. "Khalil, subhanallah, you look different," Omar stammered, trying to hide the shame of his own work uniform stained with paint and dust. "Life has smiled on me, Habibi," Khalil replied, sitting in the creaky chair Omar offered. "And it can smile on you too. In fact, that's why I'm here." There was something in Khalil's eyes that Omar couldn't define, an intense, almost feverish gleam that didn't match the warm smile he displayed. It was as if 2 different people were occupying the same body, one familiar and welcoming on the surface, and another deeper one that seemed to be observing and calculating Omar's every reaction. "Remember when we were students and talked about lost treasures in the mountains?" Khalil leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "About the Berber legends of caves full of gold hidden in the high Atlas?" Omar laughed nervously, but the laugh sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Khalil, we're not 20 years old anymore to dream about adventures. I have responsibilities. My mother is sick. What if I told you it's not a dream?" Khalil interrupted, his eyes shining with that disturbing intensity. "What if I showed you proof that these legends are real?" Khalil took a top-of-the-line smartphone from his suit's inner pocket and showed a photograph that made Omar feel an inexplicable chill down his spine. It was a cave entrance, clearly ancient, carved into the rocky face of a mountain. But what caught Omar's attention were the inscriptions on the stones around the entrance, symbols in archaic Arabic intertwined with complex geometric designs that seemed to hypnotize anyone who looked at them for too long. "3 months ago, I found this cave in the high Atlas Mountains," Khalil continued, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic tone. "Something that completely changed my life. Look at what I found inside." He swiped his finger across the screen, showing other photos. Omar saw piles of ancient coins, ornate jars, jewelry encrusted with precious stones, golden statuettes that gleamed even in the dim lantern light. It was a treasure worthy of Ali Baba's legends. "This cave holds unimaginable riches, Omar. Not just gold, historical artifacts worth millions of dirhams, maybe tens of millions. But I need someone trustworthy to help me transport everything safely." Omar looked at the photos, feeling a strange sensation of vertigo. The inscriptions on the cave walls seemed to move subtly on the screen, as if they had a life of their own. He blinked several times, but the sensation persisted. "Why didn't you take everything yourself? And why did you choose me?" Omar asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the confusion in his mind. Khalil hesitated for a moment, the first sign of uncertainty he had shown since arriving. "It's complicated. The place has its peculiarities. Let's say it's better not to go alone. And as for you, well, we've always been friends, haven't we? And I know about your mother's situation. This could solve all your problems, Omar. All of them." The mention of his mother hit Omar like a punch to the stomach. Nobody knew exactly how desperate his financial situation was. How did Khalil know about her illness? "How did you know about my mother?" Omar asked, but Khalil was already putting away his phone. "Casablanca is small for those who have open ears, my friend. What do you say? A quick trip to the mountains, we split the treasure 50-50, and you'll never have to worry about money again. Your mother can have the best doctors, the best treatments. Isn't that what you desire most?" Omar felt his heart race. It was exactly what he desired most, but something about the whole proposal made him uneasy, as if a distant voice in his mind was screaming warnings he couldn't hear clearly. Against all his instincts, and they were screaming alarms that Omar chose to ignore, he accepted Khalil's proposal. The promise of enough money to save his mother, to give her a dignified life in her final years, was stronger than any suspicion or fear. They agreed to leave on Friday afternoon. Khalil insisted it be on Friday, specifically after Maghrib prayer, when the sun began to set. "It's when the mountains are most receptive," he had said, a strange phrase that Omar couldn't fully interpret. During the week that followed, Omar noticed subtle changes in his routine. He began having vivid dreams about golden caves and voices whispering in languages he didn't recognize. He always woke up at 3:33 a.m., exactly, as if an internal clock had been programmed. And his mother, normally so observant, seemed not to notice his growing anxiety. "You're different, my son," she said on a Thursday night, while Omar prepared her medications. "Your eyes have a strange gleam. Are you praying regularly?" "Yes, Mama, I'm praying," Omar lied. The truth was that he could barely concentrate during prayers. His mind was constantly focused on the adventure awaiting him, on the gold that could change their lives. On Friday, Omar lied to his boss, saying he was sick and left work early. Khalil picked him up at 6 p.m. in a brand new Land Rover SUV, another sign of his old colleague's mysterious prosperity. They departed toward the southeast, along the winding roads leading to the Atlas Mountains. Casablanca's urban landscape gradually gave way to green fields, then to more arid and rocky terrain. The farther they got from the city, the stranger Khalil became. First were small things. Khalil began talking to himself, murmuring words in a language Omar didn't recognize. Initially, Omar thought it might be Berber, the native language of the mountains, but the sounds were more guttural, more ancient, as if they came from an era before human civilization. "Khalil, are you okay?" Omar asked when they stopped at an isolated gas station about 2 hours from Casablanca. "Never been better, my brother," Khalil replied, but his smile seemed forced, like a poorly fitted mask. "Soon you'll understand. Soon everything will make sense." Or during the journey, increasingly strange things began to happen. The car radio, which worked perfectly when they left, began picking up only static. But it wasn't ordinary static. Sometimes among the noise, human voices seemed to echo, whispering in ancient Arabic, reciting verses that Omar almost recognized, but which were slightly distorted, as if someone had taken sacred verses and twisted them to create something blasphemous. The temperatures in the car oscillated impossibly. One moment, Omar was sweating in suffocating heat. The next, his teeth were chattering from cold. The air conditioning was off, windows closed, but it was as if external forces were playing with the environment inside the vehicle. Even more disturbing was the behavior of other drivers. Some drastically slowed down when Khalil's SUV approached, as if they sensed a threatening presence. Others completely averted their gaze, refusing to make eye contact even at traffic lights. A truck driver at a rest stop made the sign of the cross and murmured prayers when Khalil passed near him. "It seems like people are avoiding you," Omar commented, trying to keep his tone casual. Khalil laughed, but the sound was different from any laugh Omar had ever heard from him before. It was too deep, too long, as if it came from a chest larger than that of a normal human being. "People sense things they don't understand, Omar. They feel changes in the air, presences they can't explain. You'll soon learn about this too." When they finally reached the base of the mountain, it was completely night. Omar looked at the clock on the dashboard and was confused. It showed 11:47 p.m., but he was sure they had left Casablanca at 6 p.m. The journey shouldn't have taken more than 4 hours, but somehow more than 5 hours had passed. The place where they stopped was isolated, a small clearing surrounded by black rocks that rose like giant teeth against the starry sky. Omar felt a deep chill run down his spine. The air was charged with sinister energy, as if the earth itself was alive and watching their every movement. There were no other cars, no other people, not even the sound of nocturnal animals. It was absolute and unnatural silence. "We have to go on foot from here," said Khalil, opening the trunk and taking out backpacks, high-powered flashlights, climbing ropes, and other equipment that Omar didn't remember them discussing. "The cave is a 2-hour walk away." "Khalil, why didn't you tell me it would be at night? This is madness. We can't climb a mountain in the dark." Khalil turned to him, and for a moment, in the flashlight's glow, Omar could swear he saw his friend's eyes shine with their own light, like those of a nocturnal animal. "Trust me, Omar. Some things can only be done in darkness. Some doors only open when the sun cannot witness what happens. The climb up the mountain was a nightmare that extended beyond the limits of physical reality. The wind howled among the rocks with sounds that didn't seem natural. They were human laments, cries of despair, seductive whispers, all mixed in a diabolical symphony that penetrated Omar's bones. He stumbled constantly, as if invisible forces were trying to trip him at every step. His legs felt heavy as lead, and the backpack seemed to gain weight with every meter traveled. Khalil, on the other hand, climbed with agility that defied any logical explanation. He moved in the dark as if he could see perfectly, as if he knew every stone, every ledge, every hole in the path. "How do you know this trail so well?" Omar shouted over the wind, but his voice seemed to be swallowed by darkness before reaching Khalil's ears. "I come here frequently," Khalil replied without turning around, his voice reaching Omar's ears clearly despite the distance and wind noise. "This place calls to me." After almost 3 hours of torturous climbing, much more than the promised 2 hours, they finally reached the cave. Omar stopped and was speechless. The entrance was exactly like in the photograph, but seeing it in person was a completely different experience. The inscriptions on the stones around the entrance didn't just glow with a faint bluish light, but pulsed rhythmically, like a giant heart. The archaic Arabic symbols intertwined with geometric designs that seemed to move when Omar tried to focus on them directly. It was as if they were looking at something that existed partially in another dimension. "Khalil, these stones, they're glowing. How is this possible?" "Yes, Omar. This is where everything changes. This is where you discover that the world is much larger and stranger than you ever imagined." They entered the cave, their flashlights cutting through the dense darkness like knives through black velvet. The interior was much larger than should have been possible. The mountain simply wasn't big enough to house a space of those dimensions. It was as if they were entering an expanded reality where the laws of physics worked differently. The entrance corridor opened into a gigantic circular chamber, with the ceiling lost in darkness above. In the center of the chamber, there was a perfectly drawn circle on the stone floor, filled with symbols and writings in multiple languages: Arabic, Hebrew, Latin, and other scripts that Omar couldn't identify. Around the circle, strategically positioned, were piles of golden objects that gleamed in the flashlight's light. Omar ran toward the treasure, his heart beating hard. Finally, the solution to all his problems was within reach of his hands. He bent down and extended his hand to touch a particularly large and ornate golden coin. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the coin crumbled into fine dust between his fingers, as if it were made of compressed golden sand. "What the hell?" That's when he heard the laughter, low, hoarse, coming from all directions at once, echoing through the cave walls and penetrating Omar's bones like a sonic virus. He slowly turned and saw Khalil standing in the center of the circle drawn on the floor, but his appearance was changing before Omar's horrified eyes. Khalil's eyes now glowed with intense red light, like burning embers. His skin was becoming grayish, with dark veins standing out like roots of a diabolic tree. He seemed to be growing in height, his proportions distorting in ways that defied human anatomy. The expensive clothes remained, but now seemed to be dressing something that was definitely not human. "Thank you for coming, Omar," said the thing that had been Khalil, but the voice came from multiple throats simultaneously, creating a diabolic harmony. "I've needed a new soul for this place for so long. I've been waiting for someone desperate enough to accept my invitation for so long." "Khalil, what's happening? What are you?" "Khalil?" The creature tilted its head in a way no human being could, almost 180 degrees. "Omar, my naive and desperate friend. Khalil died 3 months ago, the first time he visited this cave, just like others before him died. I am Malik ibn Shaitan, prince of the Djinn of the Atlas Mountains, guardian of this passage between worlds. And you, You came of your own free will to my domain, attracted by the oldest bait in the world, the promise of easy wealth. The reality of his situation hit Omar like a hammer. He tried to run toward the cave entrance, but the walls seemed to move, expand, creating corridors where none existed before. Every direction he took led him back to the center of the chamber, as if he were trapped in a maze that constantly reorganized itself. "There's no physical escape from this place, Omar," said Malik ibn Shaitan, his form now completely transformed into a 3-meter-tall creature with elongated limbs and fingers ending in claws. "This is a space between dimensions, a reality bubble that I completely control. But relax. I didn't bring you here to hurt you. I brought you here to make a proposal that will change your life forever." Omar stopped trying to flee and turned to face the creature, his legs trembling so much he could barely stand. I want to leave. Please, let me go back to my mother." "Of course you can go, Omar. No one is keeping you here against your will. But first, it would be rude not to listen to my offer, especially after coming from so far away." Malik ibn Shaitan extended one of his hands, which now looked more like a giant claw, and suddenly the air in the cave filled with 3-dimensional visions, as if Omar were inside a holographic cinema. Omar saw his mother, but not the frail and sick woman he had left at home. He saw Aisha healthy, radiant, smiling, wearing luxurious clothes, sitting in an elegant living room of a magnificent mansion. Her hands no longer trembled, her eyes shone with vitality, and she laughed with a joy Omar hadn't seen in years. The vision expanded, showing Omar a version of himself that took his breath away. He saw himself in expensive attire, driving luxury cars, living in a house with immense gardens. He saw himself respected, admired, surrounded by people who hung on his every word. He saw a beautiful wife, a woman of stunning beauty who looked at him with genuine love. He saw children playing in the garden, healthy and happy children who would never know need or suffering. Even more impressive, he saw himself doing good in the world, building hospitals, financing schools, helping needy families. He saw himself as a man who could really make a difference in the world, not just survive day after day, as he did now. "All this can be yours, Omar," murmured Malik ibn Shaitan, his voice now soft as silk and seductive as honey. "Wealth beyond your wildest imagination, perfect health for your mother. She'll live to 90, strong and lucid, success in everything you touch, true love, blessed children, the power to really help others, a life of abundance, purpose, and genuine happiness." "And what do you want in return?" Omar asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Just your soul, Omar. But don't worry, you won't die now, or tomorrow, or in the coming years. You'll live your complete life exactly as I showed you. Only when you die naturally, let's say at 80 or 90 years old, your soul will come to me instead of following its original destiny. Until then, you'll literally be the most fortunate man in Morocco." The offer was tempting, beyond any description. Omar looked again at the visions floating around him and saw decades of happiness, abundance, and purpose. He saw his mother living her final years with dignity and joy. He saw himself capable of making a real difference in the world, and if I refuse, immediately the visions changed. Omar saw his mother slowly wasting away over the coming months, suffering terrible pains he couldn't alleviate for lack of money. He saw himself aging in poverty, alone after her death, working until he could no longer, forgotten by everyone, dying in a public hospital bed with no one to hold his hand. He saw years of regret for lost opportunities, growing bitterness, completely destroyed faith. He saw himself becoming a cynical and broken man who had lost any hope that life could be good. This is your current reality, Omar, the path you're following now. Your mother has, at most, 6 months to live. You have perhaps 40 years of misery and loneliness ahead. The choice is yours. Accept my gift and live like a king, helping thousands of people along the way, or continue being a loser that not even Allah seems to want to help. These last words hit Omar like a stab directly to the heart. All his doubts about Allah, all his frustration with prayers that seemed unheard, all his anger against the injustice of his life, everything came to the surface like an infected wound that finally burst. Why would Allah allow my mother to suffer like this if he is truly merciful? Omar screamed, tears streaming down his face. Why are my prayers never answered? Why do I have to watch the most pious woman I know waste away in agony while corrupt men prosper? Excellent questions, Omar. Maybe Allah isn't as attentive as you were taught to believe. Maybe it's time for you to take the reins of your own destiny. I'm offering real power, real results, real happiness, not vague promises of rewards in an afterlife that might not even exist. Omar looked at his own trembling hands. He thought of his mother sleeping at home at this very moment, probably waking up with pains she tried to hide from him. He thought of all the medications he couldn't buy, all the treatments that were beyond his financial reach. Slowly, very slowly, Omar extended his hand toward Malik ibn Shaitan's claw. At the exact moment when Omar's fingers almost touched the jinn's claw, something extraordinary and completely unexpected happened. A voice echoed clearly in his mind. It wasn't his voice, nor the jinn's. It was a female voice, caring, familiar, singing softly, Kul a'udhu bi rabbil falak, min sharri ma khalaq. It was his mother's voice when he was a child, teaching him the protection surahs before sleep. The memory came so vividly that Omar could smell her perfume, feel the texture of her hands caressing his hair. Wa min shari ghasikin idha waqab. Omar pulled back his hand as if he had received a high-voltage electric shock. No! He shouted, closing his eyes tightly and covering his ears. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytani rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan the accursed. The jinn roared in rage, his form growing even larger, filling the entire cave with his terrifying presence. The walls trembled, stones began falling from the ceiling, and a supernatural wind swept through the chamber. Fool, idiot! You choose misery when I offered eternal glory. You choose to watch your mother die in agony when I offered miraculous healing. I choose Allah, Omar shouted back, his voice gaining strength with each word. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no strength nor power except in Allah. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa, al-hayyu al-qayyum. With each verse Omar recited, the jinn's form became less solid, as if the sacred words were acid dissolving his essence. The visions of wealth and prosperity dissolved like smoke, and the cave itself began trembling violently. You don't know what you're rejecting, roared Malik ibn Shaitan, his voice now full of despair beyond rage. Your mother will die. You'll live in poverty. You'll suffer until the end of your days. Allah won't save you, Omar. Where was he when you needed him most? For a moment, Omar felt his resolve waver. The jinn's words echoed his own deepest doubts. But then another memory emerged. His mother, already sick, but still strong enough to hold his hands one night, when he came home particularly dejected. My son, she had said, sometimes Allah tests us not to break us, but to show us what we're made of. Faith isn't believing when everything is easy. It's trusting Allah even when we don't understand His plans. If Allah decides this is my test, then I accept it, Omar replied to the jinn, now standing firm as a rock. I prefer to live poor with my soul clean than rich with it stained by sin. I prefer to trust in Allah's mercy than sell my eternity for temporary comfort. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhab an-nar. Omar continued reciting, each word charged with renewed faith. Our Lord, give us good in this life and good in the next life, and protect us from the punishment of the fire. With a final roar of fury that made the entire mountain vibrate, Malik ibn Shaitan and the entire cave dissolved in a blinding explosion of light. Omar found himself falling, and then silence. Omar woke up at sunrise, alone on the mountainside, under a pink and golden sky that had never seemed so beautiful to him. He was lying on the cold grass, holding a small, smooth stone in his hands. the only physical evidence that his experience hadn't been a terrible dream. It took him 3 hours to descend the mountain and find a road where he could hitchhike back to Casablanca. Throughout the journey, one word echoed in his mind: Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah. He never saw Khalil again. In fact, when he investigated at the university, he discovered that Khalil had really died 3 months earlier, exactly as the Djinn had said. Car accident on a mountain road near the High Atlas. His body was never found. The small stone Omar brought from the mountain proved to be, after evaluation by a jeweler, a semi-precious turquoise of reasonable quality. It wouldn't make him rich, but when he sold it, it gave exactly 3,000 dirhams, enough to buy his mother's medications for the next 4 months. During these months, something Omar could only describe as miraculous began to happen. His mother's condition, which had been steadily deteriorating, completely stabilized. A new government health program was implemented, offering imported medications at subsidized prices. An experimental treatment for advanced diabetes became available free at Mohammed VI University Hospital. Most importantly, Omar got a better job. The director of a larger engineering company noticed his meticulous work and unwavering dedication and invited him to join the team. The salary was double the previous one, with health benefits covering both him and his mother. "Ya Ummi," Omar said to his mother one night, 6 months after the mountain incident, while she embroidered peacefully in a comfortable armchair. "Did you know it was your voice that saved me on that mountain?" Aisha looked up from her embroidery, a gentle smile illuminating her face, which had recovered much of its color and vitality. "My son, a mother's sincere prayers travel faster than light to reach Allah's ears. I always knew you would find the right path. Your soul is pure, Omar. You just needed to be reminded of that." Omar smiled, holding his mother's hand, hands that were now firm and warm again. "How did you always have such certainty that Allah hadn't abandoned us?" "Because, my dear son, sometimes Allah answers our prayers in ways we only understand much later. You asked for money to save me, but Allah gave you something much more valuable. He saved your soul from what could have destroyed it forever, and a saved soul always finds its way to true prosperity." 2 years later, Omar married Khadija, a dedicated nurse he met at the hospital during one of his mother's treatments. She had noticed how he cared for Aisha with infinite patience and unconditional love, and immediately knew she had found a man of genuine character. Today, 3 years after the mountain incident, Omar runs his own small engineering company. He's not rich in the sense the Djinn had promised, but he prospers enough to live with dignity and help others. His mother is healthy at 64, stronger and happier than she's been in years. Omar and Khadija have a small daughter, Fatima, whom they're raising with love and solid values. The most dangerous temptation, Omar now says regularly in lectures he offers at local mosques, isn't the one that seems obviously evil. It's the one that seems to solve all our problems, that offers us exactly what we most desire in moments of greatest despair. His story spread through Casablanca's Muslim community, then throughout Morocco, and eventually reached Muslims around the world through online videos and lectures. Omar never asks for money for his presentations. He considers it part of his responsibility as someone who was tested and remained firm. "The Djinn know our weak points better than we know ourselves," he continues in his lectures. "They study our needs, our fears, our deepest desires. They don't come to us offering things we'll obviously recognize as evil. They come offering solutions to our most desperate problems." Omar always ends his lectures by telling about the moment when he almost accepted the Djinn's offer, and how it was his mother's voice reciting the Quran that saved him. Allah doesn't abandon us, brothers and sisters, even when we feel He isn't listening. Sometimes He allows us to go through difficulties not as punishment, but as purification. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as difficulties, and the greatest dangers present themselves as perfect opportunities. His mother, Aisha, frequently accompanies him to these lectures. a living testimony of how Allah can heal not just bodies, but entire situations when we maintain our faith. "My son almost lost his soul trying to save my life," she tells audiences. But Allah taught us that some things are more precious than life itself: the purity of the soul, the integrity of faith, trust in Allah, even in the darkest hours. Omar al-Rashid's story teaches us profound lessons about faith, temptation, and the nature of divine testing. How many of you have felt tempted by offers that seemed too good to be true? How many have questioned why Allah allows us to go through difficulties when we are people of faith? The answer lies in Omar's experience. Our faith is tested not to break us, but to strengthen and purify us. Every no we say to haram, every time we choose the difficult but correct path, every moment we trust Allah, even when we don't understand His plans, all this builds a spiritual wall that no jinn, no temptation, no force of evil can break. The world of jinn is real, brothers and sisters. The Quran warns us about them, and the experiences of people like Omar confirm that they remain active in our world, seeking vulnerable souls to deceive. But we're also reminded that our protection is always available, in the words of the Quran, in sincere prayers, in unwavering trust in Allah. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. In the comments, tell your own experiences with temptations and how faith helped you overcome them. How many of you recognize moments in your lives when you almost accepted proposals that seemed to solve all problems, but would have cost something too precious? And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that illuminate the mysteries of the invisible world and strengthen our understanding of Islamic faith. Always remember the words of the Quran, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And whoever fears Allah, He will make for him a way out.